but I will say I'll have to keep it to a pretty tight, like we can run probably about a half hour from now.
Sure.
But I'm gonna have to call it pretty tight there.
Sounds good.
So yeah, I'll let you run the show.
Yeah. So essentially, like about 2 years ago, like what was the state of the nation for the scene when you first entered?
I would say I was new to it, so one of the first things I had to do is figure that out for myself.
Right.
You know, I would say, back then, for example, you could put out a referral link to a Coinbase account and actually, get people to hit that because not everybody had a Coinbase account.
Yeah.
So in terms of adoption, maybe that gives you an idea of where things were then. Like, 2 years ago, some people knew about Coinbase, some people didn't, but a lot of people were searching at that time, how do I buy ETH? How do I buy ETH? How do I do this? How do I do that? So I approached it from a user perspective, I guess. And the first thing that came to my mind was that there's a lot of deep technical stuff going on here. But, I was probably one of the least technical people figuring out my way through this at the time. And, I have an engineering background. I've never coded, but I was a hands-on system administrator for a while. So, I knew what infrastructure was and I knew how to work with infrastructure like that. But yeah, it was smaller from the perspective of, I think the community was smaller. It was a little more casual, I guess, because, the whole ICO thing, I think Golem was the first ICO I participated in. I think that was really the most big one at the time.
Yeah.
So like then it was a lot quieter too. You didn't have a lot of the noisy ICO and, that nonsense going on. So yeah, I felt like it was just right at the beginning of that wave. And it was, as far as I could tell, it was purely developers. There was really nobody I was aware of in the space that wasn't a hardcore developer at the time. And I think a lot of the projects, I think there's Vinay Gupta who led the release of Ethereum at the beginning. So, he's probably the only one that I came across back then. But yeah, I think, because it was also pre-funding for a lot of projects too, I think it was just really the founding teams, which typically were hardcore developers, building their stuff and not really knowing where it was going to go, but doing it with a lot of optimism and enthusiasm and doing it as technical people do, in ways that made sense to them.
So I guess when did you first get involved with potentially with actually helping out with a project, in terms of getting more engaged?
So let's say about a year and a half ago at this point, a little more.
Yeah.
I think it's probably March of 20, I guess it would go back to 16. No, 17. March of 2017. I stumbled on ENS, the Ethereum name service. And that connected with me. I was like, oh, wow, this is DNS for Ethereum. And because I had telecom and IT background, that connected with me. And it also connected with the idea that I had that, this stuff needs to become a lot more usable. And I thought this was one of the most powerful ways that could happen. It just instantly clicked. Instead of using a long crypto name or long crypto address, you could use a human readable name. I was like, wow, it's brilliant in its simplicity, So I followed that project for a month or so. I saw it was about to launch. I followed the launch. I saw that the initial launch attempt failed. And Nick Johnson, essentially the creator of ENS, wrote a really thorough post-mortem on why the first launch failed.
I think I came across that actually, but don't remember any of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was kind of a big deal, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a big deal among the people who are following the project because it was a very high-profile project at the time, and I think it still is, but in different ways. And so it failed, and Nick wrote this postmortem. And I think about just a few weeks before I wrote my first post about PMs in crypto, I think, which was why your blockchain project needs a project manager.
Yeah.
So I wrote that right before, so I thought to myself, wow, this postmortem is a great proving ground for some of the concepts that I've been testing with someone who, in an audience that would probably listen because they just felt some pain from not having, a PM. So I took Nick's postmortem and I basically broke it down point by point and said, here's how a PM could help the launch succeed next time. And I basically went through that postmortem point by point, and just how a PM could, help prevent that from happening again. And at the end of that post, I volunteered to be that person. And as a result, Nick contacted me, we spoke, we synced up on, motivations and intentions. And then from there, I became the part-time ENS project manager. And it was me, Nick, Alex Van de Sand, and that was it. So we basically launched, I think, maybe a month later, successfully. So that was really my on-ramp into the crypto space.
Just quickly, what were some of the points that you broke down within that post?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
Sure. Yeah.
I'll share that post with you, though.
Will do.
I think in general, it wasn't anything, earth-shaking or groundbreaking. It was really basic PM principles that, just by the nature of their backgrounds and the time, they were both doing this also part-time. So there's just no time to do it. So I think it's just real basic organization, tracking, follow through. I would say are the three main points. So it's just collecting everything into one place and helping understand what's critical and what really needs to get done. As opposed to Nick having a list in his head, Alex having a list in his head. Just.
Why do you think such things are neglected until you were brought into that?
Like I said, because they were both working on this part-time.
Yeah.
They're both developers, so any time they could spare building this was spent heads down writing code.
Yeah.
So there was no real time or sense of needing this. And then I think the idea of, hey, it's a small project, it's only two of us really, we can coordinate on our own. I think that is probably part of it too.
So I guess since then, since the launch, I understand the ENS team has grown to around 5 to 6 or 8, around that number.
Yeah, it's probably between 5 to 8, depending on the day and the month and what we have going on. Yeah, it's like 5 to 8 of us in different full and part-time capacities that ebb and flow, as the needs of the project.
I guess I wonder if there's any, if you've actively been helping guide the team in any very specific way, or if not a very conscious way, in terms of, I guess, culture, philosophy behind how you build, just things to look out for,
I think, one of the things that it's interesting. I've been thinking about this concept that I've been calling shadow PM in my mind. I guess I'm somewhat sitting in a shadow here. But the idea is almost doing the PM work in the background, and interacting with the team members, as their input's needed, but almost building the PM structure around them and underneath them. It's almost, So almost like building a foundation when somebody's standing on a temporary foundation, if you will. So it's almost doing all that work around and beneath them, while trying to stay out of the way. And one of the areas that I've been doing this the most is with the new ENS name manager DApp. I've been doing that there. Basically, that's the user-facing DApp that allows users to manage names that they already have. So what was really helpful there was guiding conversations, organizing conversations, structuring the work, breaking the work up, prioritizing the work. You're smiling. I'm guessing this resonates with you.
Yeah.
But it's that basic stuff. It was coming in, leading the conversation, trying to prevent the conversation from going in circles. Documenting what we decided, breaking the work up into manageable pieces, and then following through to make sure that work gets done. And tactically, it's as simple as having a regular call, and we do it every couple weeks. No, once a week, every couple weeks. We don't do it very often. Guiding that conversation, documenting what we decided, making sure that the team after that call writes down the to-dos that they would, and then following through on those to-dos until they're done. So I think it's really that simple, because before that, the tendency is, I think, for people to talk, and no one really wants to take notes. Nobody takes notes, and it's really easy to get into the spin cycles. So I think scope definition and prioritizing and follow through are really key.
Yeah.
And tactically, it comes from writing stuff down, asking people to write things down themselves and provide updates.
It's often I left my PM role at Tenzon recently, and how I explained my job there was just I just sat at meetings and helped make sure everyone were talking about the right things. It's just when you're in the meeting, everyone kind of sits down, and some engineer, I guess a team member, right, probably sent an agenda to everyone. You don't know why the meeting was there.
Maybe there's an agenda. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe, right? And then everyone's kind of confused. They stumble into the room because it's there's no agenda. No one's really primed to really talk about anything. And then you start to unravel, why this meeting was called in the first place. And then it's you kind of have to set up the stage for an act or play almost, right? For this conversation to play out, you have to set out the context and so on. And a lot of that's just once you have that set up, framing the conversation contextually, right, as well as for everyone else, then it's you can kind of just step back and let everyone kind of play their own roles and kind of touch in and interject when needed, really. But it's almost like being a producer on a TV show where you're just plugging in the cable, setting up the lights, kind of coordinating, I guess. So that's not the only team you've been involved with. You've been involved with some other projects, such as staking projects and Aragon as well.
Yeah, so I was the product manager for through Aragon's Alpha launch, which is their first mainnet launch, and that happened the day before DevCon started, or day of DevCon starting essentially. So that was a pretty intensive role. It was, the title was product manager. The role at that stage was, I would say, heavier on the project manager side, and started to shift more toward the product management side as we got closer to launch. But I mean, I would say the principles remain the same. Toward the end of that, as launch got closer, I started to look more into the roadmap and capturing user stories. And right after the launch, I conducted some user interviews to collect some really helpful feedback on the product that we released. In general, I'd say the principles were the same, but the amount of structure and the amount of follow through and the amount of coordination was greater because the scope was much bigger and the team was bigger. And in that sense, that one was also kind of, I feel like it was capturing everything that had been done up until that date and then somewhat like funneling it into a stream and helping guide that stream. And then ultimately converging it to a point where we said, okay, this is the release. And now let's open it back up again. So the way I see it, it ebbs and flows, You need to just kind of ebb it and, guide the flow of energy as it's going. Make sure it converges to a point where you can say done is done, and it's out. And then after that, you open it up again and you start to converge it again. Because what I've also come to learn, pre-crypto and now in my experience here is that, closing that last 15% of whatever it is, whether it's a sprint, a release, a milestone, whatever the case may be, takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. And that last 15% takes probably as much, if not more effort than the first 85%. And it's in that last 15% that, you can get caught in an infinite do loop. And that just leads to frustration and stagnation. So I really believe there's a lot of power in, helping a team get to done is done is done. We're calling this done. We're releasing it. We're done.
A cadence.
We're done forever. We're not done forever, but we're done for now. We're going to enjoy a success in that. And now we're going to move to the next thing, as opposed to, well, we're almost done. Now that we're almost done, we can do this stuff too. And then, done. I compare it to the analogy of like always splitting the difference as you're moving toward a wall. Like if you continue to split 50%, you actually never get there. Mm. Now I've actually seen this in Cosmos too, as a validator. Every time we're getting close to a release, there's this, and we just experienced it last night. Every time we get close to a release, we're supposed to start the game of stakes, probably 2 months ago. Yeah. We get close to a release, the release gets delayed because, the team might be trying to fit one more thing in or found one more bug, or, releases something that's untested. And as a result, we get through these spin cycles of trying to launch and can't launch, but now we've gotten to a place where we become wary of launching if it's untested. So now, we at least make sure it's tested. So, it's almost been some community pressure to help, improve that process. But I guess what I'm saying is that this tendency, I think, to almost get to the finish line and then feel like, oh, wow, we're almost there, so let's just do a few more things, really, really is a big factor in projects getting infinite do loops, and having trouble shipping and releasing. So I think being conscious of that is a really important thing to do.
I guess within, I guess since Nick Johnson brought you into ENS, right? It was, it seemed like he understood the value of such a project manager or product manager, right?
Yes.
And I think how was your experience of Aragon, of other projects, such as Cosmos? How was the attitude towards product management or project management? Because I've generally found that, not a lot of people understand the role well. I mean, it is a very fairly amorphous role, across various companies in general. It's just kind of like sometimes the definition can be like someone who helps build valuable products and helps ship them, right? Sometimes you get like charts where it's like this, they're in charge of these things, right? And I personally like to keep it simple, and it's just someone who kind of helps guide the process of developing a great usable product. I mean, usable as in valuable product, to customers or users, so the attitude towards it within teams, such as Aragon, maybe.
I think, speaking more generally, I think the general feel in this space is that, it's a developer-led rule. It's a developer-led world.
Yeah.
I think teams who have experience in, let's say teams who are in this world having come from, say, a larger project or larger company with more structure and have worked with a project or product manager before, understand the value of it. I think those that haven't don't necessarily understand the value of it.
Yeah.
And then I think the other tricky thing is, to me, project and product management, well, especially project management, when done well, almost becomes invisible.
Yeah.
Because the process is in place, it's running smoothly, stuff's getting done. It's almost like an insurance policy, because, you've essentially gotten ahead of the problems and prevented them from happening, as opposed to responding and reacting.
Or like a pencil sharpener.
In what way?
In the sense that, the pencil still works, right? You sharpen it to every now and then, basically constant project management. But then, like, if you remove the pencil sharpener, right, you can still use the pencil for a while until it gets blunt and eventually runs out of,
Or broken, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the other challenge, because once things are going well, and my style has always been to use as light of a touch as possible. So I think what happens there is that as the work becomes more and more invisible, and fewer fires come up to put out, there's also a tendency to wonder, well, do we even need this person here doing this? Because, what's the point?
Yeah.
And I think the danger of that is that, things may hold together on their own after that a little while, but then over time, things may slowly just revert back to where they were,
Yeah.
So I think, so I still think there's still a general sense in the space that PMs are unnecessary overhead. But Nick really does recognize the value of PMs in the space, and that feels really refreshing. And he does come from Google, so I've never really talked to him explicitly about it, but I would have to guess that part of that experience has informed what's happened, in his perspective.
Having strong product management.
Yeah, and how that can be helpful. But yeah, I think Nick is still the exception to the rule in many of these cases. But I would say that regardless of your view on crypto investment funds, two that I've talked to recently, pretty well-known crypto investor funds, in funds that are also well-respected in the crypto community, have both told me that they believe it's a really critical role. And when they look to invest, they look for someone who's doing product management or project management, more so product management in this space.
Yeah.
So I really believe it's having someone on the team owning the product and, getting stuff done and helping get stuff done is critical to a project's success.
I found that developers who've experienced good or great product management or product leadership in some senses, now after experiencing that, see good PMs or product management as a safe harbor. I've experienced that in the past, and previously as a designer, and even now if I were to go back into a designer role, I want a good product manager to kind of have my back, essentially, so that I can fully focus on understanding the user well and focusing on user value, right? And I could just I know the rest will be taken care of. I'll be positioned where I should be. And I feel like that comes with trust. How do you think about how do you think we can gain as product people, just help in terms of doing product management? How can we gain more trust with the teams and developers, especially ones who've experienced really negative product management,
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it comes from building personal relationships with the team. I think that's one point. I think it's getting to know the team, personally as well as in a work setting. And I don't necessarily mean, especially if it's for remote, I don't necessarily mean that, you have to, go out with them on the weekend, every weekend or whatever the case may be. But it's more just being able to have a conversation that's not about GitHub issues, or DevCon. It's more than that. So I think that's where it starts. But I think it also comes from showing that people like us listen, and we're not simply like trying to force fit process on top of stuff because we think it's right, or more inexperienced PMs may have this insecurity and they find security in process, and what I did here has to work here or else I don't know what to do. So I think it also comes from listening and adjusting, and if there's a real aversion to doing certain things, like not forcing people to do it, and trying to ease their burden when it comes to adopting these systems and processes by taking on more of it ourselves, at least initially, until they realize that, hey, we're doing this consciously, and ultimately it will make your life easier. Like one of the things we were able to do at Aragon is, get from, when I first got there, I unexpectedly helped manage, I would call it their first big Rinkeby release, 0.5. And that had been well underway before I got there, and I jumped in at the beginning, but it was essentially this series of infinite, what were called war rooms at the time, and it's just like, over, a lot of time being spent, and not a lot getting done, and people, just really getting.
Was it a pattern of like, do some work, and then they'd be like, okay, we really got to put our heads together again, and go to a big meeting to discuss all the plans, and then like a repetitive like behavior of that, because
it was more execution focused. It was, okay, we're there. I think we got everything done. Let's try and launch. And then it was saying, oh, nope, we missed that, or we missed this, or we missed this, or something else. And it was simply because, it was all developers, and everybody had their heads down writing and coding it. So, we got from there to the mainnet launch, which was, an amazing effort by the development team, who put in, amazing amounts of dedication and, time and effort to get it done. But, when that happened, when we launched, it was, without these infinite war rooms, which we called them the first time around. So I feel like, getting a team to a point where they do recognize and feel, the difference of the work environment. Is also key to building that trust, where they realize that, you're not there to make their lives harder. You're actually there to make their lives easier.
Yeah. I've had a lot of, I've struggled quite a bit in my previous role as a PM, kind of building greater trust of the founders, mainly because how I've learned product management from my like other PMs I've worked under as a designer before and so on, right, is a fairly lax and loose kind of a moral, style, where it's like, hey, like, let's just coordinate, we'll implement processes one at a time, ease things into it, kind of loosely coordinate, but get the end outcome out, essentially, really. And, the founders were, founders of a company, they're highly anxious, they're highly ambitious as well. And oftentimes, I wouldn't say it was an effort hurting them and building enough trust. I feel like that was a lagging problem, in terms of getting them to understand why I'm doing certain things, but also, like work with them a bit better and kind of quell the anxieties about, let's go, and so on. And I was wondering if you face similar issues with founders, especially as kind of like the project manager or product manager,
Yeah, again, even outside of crypto, I think.
Yeah.
In any high growth, or in any environment where you're working with people who expect a lot from themselves, and in turn expect a lot from the teams, I think one of the hardest things to do is slow people down.
Mm.
So I think it takes, I think you have to slow down and consciously look at what's going on and what's being done. So I think without that recognition, you're never going to change anything.
Yeah.
And I think that's like, a lot of things in life, but I think the hardest thing is to slow a team down and convince the founders of that project or whatever, whoever these people may be, investors, whatever the case may be, that you're not asking them to stop completely. However, if you don't slow it down and look at what you're doing and maybe hit the pause button, or at least like slow it down so you can make changes, then, there's no point, because otherwise you're going to keep repeating the same process and get the same result over and over and over again. So I think one of the biggest challenges, especially working with, founders, investors, whatever the case may be, is slowing the project down, long enough to start implementing positive change. And then I think the other really difficult thing is scope. I think having to work with teams like this to make the difficult trade-offs between scope, time, and resources is a critical thing for people like us to do. But it can also make us super unpopular.
Yeah. No founder likes saying you have 3 options, Yeah,
it can make us really unpopular. And I think it's easy to become a target in that case. And this is just because you're putting yourself out there saying, hey, I can't in good conscience just agree to this, because if I do, it's not going to serve the project well, it's not going to serve the team well, it's not going to serve anyone well, and me well. So here's what we got. This is what we have. This is what we're going to do. We either need to reduce the scope, we need to increase our timeline expectation, or we need to add people. And then, so setting that is one thing, and then sticking to it.
Oh yeah.
Or if you don't stick to it, okay, I get it, things change, but you also have to then realize that trade-offs are required. I think that's the other part of it. Like, we can't say, okay, got it, here's our timeline, here's our scope, we know how many, people we have that are going to work on it, but next week comes along, oh man, I just spoke to this project, and wouldn't it really be cool to do this?
Unplanned work.
We can do it, no doubt, but we can't do it and still hit the original scope and the original design with the number of people we have. Well, why not? It should be easy,
This is important, this is really important for the whole company.
It's important, it should be easy, it won't take long,
Have you read the Phoenix Project?
No.
Oh, wow. I started, it's basically like a first person recount of like a person who was promoted to VP of IT, and basically goes through the process of fixing a dysfunctional company. It's literally hilarious from a PM perspective.
All right.
I'll link to you later. So what do you plan to do in 2019? Just curious.
I really think, since I left Aragon, I feel really fortunate that this whole idea of crypto PM has really been well received by people I've spoken to. And I think, this recent price downturn has shown people that, it takes more than a great idea to realize these dreams that they have. And I really think it's execution that's going to, differentiate between the teams who have a great vision and really, really feel passionately about realizing the promise of decentralization, and, the teams that are able to deliver on that. So, I really think that the work that we're doing is really critical to making that happen. And, I think as more pain is felt in the space, more and more people are going to realize this. So I really feel like, I'd like to be able to help project ship. And I feel like the way I can do that and help projects do that is by consulting right now. So I hope to, work with, a smaller number of interesting projects over the next 6 months, and, get them to help them understand what progress really feels like, what done is done and what that feels like and how that inspires you to go again. And I really hope I can, help projects get there, and done for them could be just simply saying, here's what we want our first release to look like, or done for them could be, let's get to mainnet, so I really, that's going to be a big focus of mine this year.
Have you thought of like basically coming in as a PM, but then helping coach current developers into that role? Because hiring a PM is another thing, like for a team, and there's just the huge barrier to entry, even in ecosystem, but let alone a team itself. And I feel like it might be potentially easier to come in as a PM, portray what it looks like, what progress looks like, right? And find the right person to shape them into the role of a PM or facilitator.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think we'll have to conclude on that. But yeah, what I've been trying to set up are things and projects in a way that I can come in and be helpful in very specific ways, but also set it up then that it can be handed off to the team, and whether that's somebody internally or somebody that they hire. The way I'm trying to put it together is that, what I'm putting together, I can ultimately hand off to the team and the team can run with it. I'd be happy to, help a developer do that. Yeah. The one thing I would say, though, that I've seen in the past a lot is that it's a big mistake to have someone trying to manage the project or the product, but also build the product. I think that's somewhat of a recipe for disaster. Trying to do both at once.
Cool. I think I should better let you get back to work.
Yeah, well, we can have a part 2.
Yeah, no, let's keep chatting. Like, you get to learn how people frame things in different ways. But I think, I'm really, really curious. On how teams just can deliver more value. Like, I'm personally looking, I think I've been just trying to explore a bit more on PM, or product management. I don't like to say product manager anymore kind of in this space, because it's like, I feel like a way to better frame it is product management is a function within a team. It is a set of roles that can bleed out into various aspects of every department. And, it's almost like, it's almost kept in the darkness, right? Undiscovered and unrealized within a team usually. And you have to often show that this is a role that's there and it's important and it's in the middle of all these roles. And kind of like educate people and the teams that at least at the very minimum that there is such a role of product owner or the scrum mastership, right? That encompasses the blend of product management and project management. And I think that's a first step towards just realizing how to build and ship better products. That's something I think, even not just Web3 open source product management is its own flavor of product management, but I think we can start with even just basic education on product potentially.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value that comes from reminding people that they're building this for someone to use. And in order for it to be powerful, a lot of people have to use it. So I think that's an important thing to remind developers.
That's also why I'm actually going forward. If I'm going to be joining a project or whatever, I actually want to lean towards the marketing and growth side of things, and maybe step away from the PM side.
But I think that would have to be part 2 because I'm going to have to.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
All right. Cool. Well, thanks for asking me to do this, and we'll be talking through the other channels too.
We'll do. Take care.
All right. Bye.